On the fourth floor of the Nakai Union building, close to the heart of Tokyo, is where I began my career as a sci-fi writer. We ran the editing department for the popular sci-fi magazine, Monthly Sci-Fi. Everyone was working like mad as the next deadline was closing in. The reason the room was so warm wasn't because of the heating, but undoubtedly because of how hard everyone was working. It was my second year without a job, and while attending prep school, I managed to get some work through my connections, writing a few pieces for Monthly Sci-Fi. If it went well, then I was thinking of giving up school and becoming a full-time writer. And I'm telling you, I need those pictures today. If they're not here, that's right, you're out. The man screaming into the phone was the chief designer, Tashiro-san. He was usually a warm and pleasant man, but he became a different person as deadlines approached. He was like a bear, so when he changed, it was frightening. "Oh, Professor, how are things?" When he was done on the phone, Tashiro-san saw me and came over. This idiot, he spilt ink all over the newly finished illustrations. Seriously, how stupid. His normal warm demeanor was gone. I smiled and tried to move on with a vague expression. There are as many illustrators as there are stars in the sky, so these things happen. Tashiro-san laughed as I tried to console him. "You're right, although it's a problem if it keeps happening." The person typing away at the computer, wearing gold-rimmed glasses and muttering about something, was the editor, Tada-san. Somewhat chubby, he looked just like an otaku, and he was a huge anime fan, but when it came to computers, his knowledge was unrivaled. As I passed by his desk, he suddenly stood up like a doll, having been wrapped up in his own world until that point. He turned to me and spoke fast. "Your novel was interesting. It's rising up the reader's popularity ranks. People are wondering if it'll be made into a game." He was praising my serial novel, Mask of Anubis. I was so happy that I patted his large belly. "Huh, is that so? I'm glad." "Stop that," Tada-san said, but he was still smiling. For some reason, he only ever smiled like that around me. "Katsumata, is Kikuchi-sensei's manuscript in yet?" The one screaming in Kansai dialect was the vice editor and sci-fi manic, Gomikawa-san. He was square and broad like a robot, a man with a stern face who learnt karate, but in the editing department, they called him the comedian. The one he was yelling at was the part-timer, Katsumata, 19 years old. He was learning karate at the same dojo as Gomikawa-san, but he was unexpectedly strong. He was in charge of collecting manuscripts on his bike. He was a little rough, but he had a strong sense of justice. The one watching them flustered was the editor in training, Kanda Machi. She was extremely short-sighted and wore thick, heavy glasses, and she also appeared to like Katsumata, who was the same age as her. "Hey, I brought the manuscripts." I love newbies because they always stick to the deadline. Gomikawa-san then noticed me and called out. He was always so full of energy. I answered him calmly. It's normal to finish by a deadline, I muttered. Kid, you're amazing. He was honestly impressed. You're a model writer. Now I was embarrassed. Ah, they're here. Bring them over here. A voice came from the other side of the desk. It was the designer and my former schoolmate, Yuko. She was 1 year above me in high school, and we were both members of the sci-fi club. I liked movies, she liked novels. We were always at odds over our same hobby. But she was so cute that everyone looked up to her. After she graduated from design school, she joined the editing section of Monthly Sci-Fi, while I was jobless and at prep school while writing novels. It was Yuko who introduced me to the chief editor as a writer for the magazine. I turned towards Yuko's desk at the end of the room. On the way, the chief editor Asafuji called out to me. It was rare for a woman like Asafuji to be the chief editor of a magazine like this. She must have been over 30, a career woman that everyone in the publication world acknowledged for her skills. Thanks for coming. What was your name again? Domon, ma'am, I answered. Thanks for coming in today. Not only did you bring in your manuscript, but you came in to give us some extra help. She said the words out loud, but her tone didn't sound very sorry. I vaguely smiled, and as she turned back to her desk, I walked over to Yuko's. I handed her the draft of my serial novel. She started looking over it. I sat down on the pipe chair next to her and watched her hands as she gathered the manuscript pages together. Hey, Yuko-senpai, why don't we skip the next reunion and go watch a movie together, just the two of us? I didn't think she'd agree, but I had to try. No way! She answered without taking her eyes off the page. Why? Because, Domon-kun, I know your true intentions. She was right, and so there was nothing I could say. After she'd turned through roughly 4 pages, she suddenly looked up. Hey, do you feel that trembling? Yuko-senpai, you might be working a little too hard. She spoke louder than before. Hey, look! The bookshelves really are shaking! I looked around the room. The ballpoint pen on her desk silently rolled off. The sound of the pen as it hit the floor in the silent room sounded oddly loud. Then, it was an earthquake. It must have been magnitude 5 or 6. Yuko-senpai and I scrambled under the desk. The steel bookcase by the wall tilted. The books went everywhere, brushing my shoulder and landing on the desk. Tada-san screamed and fell to the floor with his chair. Machi screamed and tried to run for the door, but a locker fell on her. Her glasses went flying. Luckily, the terrifying tremors finished after about 10 seconds. Is everyone okay? Asafuji-san screamed. Yeah. Tashiro-san answered from beneath the drafting table. Hey, is Machi okay? Gomikawa-san asked Katsumata. He ran over to help her as she lay beneath the locker. "She's out cold, but she's breathing," Katsumata answered while lifting her plump body. Tada-san crawled out from beneath his desk, rubbing his head. Seemed he fell to the floor and then rolled under there. After checking whether his computer was still on, his mouth twisted into a grin. "Yuko-senpai, are you okay?" "Oh, that was scary. I think I'm okay," she answered with a pale face. Her eyes glistened with tears. In the end, other than Machi, everyone was fine. Everyone rushed around the room, cleaning things up. Katsumata and Gomikawa-san put the locker back in its place. Tashiro-san and Asafuji-san picked up the floppy disks that had fallen to the floor. Yuko-senpai and I put the fallen bookshelf back in place and started picking up the fallen books. Then the second and real terror struck us. A terrifying roar sounded beneath our feet. Everyone thought it was an aftershock. Only this time, it felt like we were falling. The stormy white lights of the city disappeared from the window. In its place, black earth filled the window instead. Then various shockwaves assaulted the building. Bang! The lights went out with a terrifying bang. I ran for the exit. A piece of concrete fell from the roof and landed on my head and back. A second impact hit, as though raising the earth. Shards of glass rained down from above us as the floor lifted us. Then I passed out. Someone was calling me from far away. My consciousness slowly returned as I tried to stand up from beneath the rubble. Shit! Is everyone dead? It took me several seconds to realize it was Katsumata's voice. "Katsumata, are you okay?" I said to the shadow in the darkness as I slowly stood up. My entire body screamed in pain. "Domon-san, that you?" I heard his relieved voice from close by. Before I knew it, he was right beside me. Maybe I wasn't fully with it yet. "We ain't got no emergency lights or nothing?" he asked in his usual harsh tone that never knew worry. "I dunno. I don't work for editorial." To be honest, I didn't know much about the editorial department. I only work part-time picking up the manuscripts as well. His tone turned vague. Contrary to his appearance, perhaps he really was quite gentle. "Will you help me look for some?" he said bravely. "Okay." I stood up painfully. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I saw various things. The knocked-over desks, bookshelves, and books and papers all over the floor. I slid my feet across the ground as I searched. My toes hit something soft. I bent down to search and found Yuko-senpai passed out beneath a desk. I yelled her name by her ear. "Senpai! Yuko-senpai!" I grabbed her and screamed. "Ugh." A heavy yet worrying sound escaped her lips. Thankfully, she wasn't hurt bad. Rather, I seemed to be in worse shape than her. We left everyone to her care and continued looking for the emergency lights. According to Yuko-senpai, they were in a large steel case in the area between the office and support space. Most of the things in the room had fallen over, but that steel case somehow seemed to have withstood it. Every single glass door on the case had broken. Most of the papers inside had scattered around the room. The emergency lights were supposed to be on the bottom shelf. Katsumata was already on his knees looking for them. I searched around my feet, and then, as I made my way towards the shelf, in the darkness, something yelled strangely and stood up. Yuko-senpai let out a quiet scream. I saw Katsumata ready himself in the dim light. Wait! It was Gomikawa-san. Gomikawa-san? Yuko-senpai said. Shaking his head, Gomikawa-san approached us. Damn it! My head's pounding. Apparently, he'd hit his head. Suddenly, the lights in the room came back on. I squinted at their brightness and looked around the room, my eyes landing on Katsumata with the emergency lights. I heard Asafuji-san and Tada-san's screams as they reacted to the lights. I saw Tada-san lying between a fallen desk and the drafting table. Frowning, he slowly got up. Damn! Is the computer okay? He muttered as he stood up. Asafuji-san stood up and looked around at everyone. What a disaster! We have to clean this up. Then her words cut off. Beneath the emergency lights filling the room, the window was covered by a rock face. It covered the entire thing. Hey, what the hell happened to the building? Gomikawa-san screamed. But nobody answered. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. More importantly, is Machi okay? Just as I was about to ask, what happened to Machi? Gomikawa-san asked Katsumata. She's resting on the sofa over there now. There was a sofa in the corner of the room that had been cleaned off. Machi lay on it, but she still didn't appear to be awake. Silence fell over the room. Everyone sat on the floor or on chairs that had fallen over. Nobody said a word. Where did Tashiro-san go? Is he beneath a desk somewhere? At Yuko-senpai's words, the room went into a panic. Everyone stood up and began searching the room. But nobody found his large countenance in the room. The bear-like man had disappeared. Everyone cleaned the messy room as they searched for him. Then the entire room brightened up just a little more. The above-head emergency lights had finally kicked in. As we calmed down, we considered our situation. The first tremors were an earthquake, huh? Asafuji-san said. That's true. But the problem is what followed that. This time, it was Gomikawa-san. It was like when you ride an elevator, Yuko-senpai said. A landslide, I screamed. That's what I think. I told them what I'd been thinking since earlier. This building's base and Maybe its foundations. Perhaps they were weak from the very beginning. Then with tonight's blizzard, they got even worse. Then the earthquake happened and so it all came crumbling down. Gomikawa-san made falling motions with his hands, continuing my train of thought. How far did we fall? Tada-san muttered as he fixed the computer's wiring. After that impact, it can't have been too much, I answered, although I wasn't very confident in it. Tada-san continued fiddling with the wires, and I wasn't sure whether he even heard me. All right, the backup power's working. Good girl. Tada-san grinned as he worked on the computer. He was proud of all the functions he'd added through his own private expenses. Even in an emergency situation like this, his beloved computer was of the utmost importance. But Domon-kun, we're on the 4th floor. And look. Yuko-senpai pointed at the window. The editorial office was on the top floor of the 4-floor building, which would mean that the entire building had fallen underground. It's too dark above or below to see anything. Katsumata checked the window and then returned to everyone. Oh yeah, I'll go check the roof. Maybe we'll be able to crawl to the surface. Gomikawa-san stood up. The roof's no good. A voice screamed from the door. Everyone turned to look at it. The door slowly opened. It was Tashiro-san. I tried to leave via the roof, but it's covered in dirt and the door won't open, he said as he walked towards us. A white cloth was wrapped around his head, but it was dyed red with blood. Why did you go out alone? Gomikawa-san scolded him. We're locked in here. Tashiro-san ignored him and said the words none of us wanted to hear. The 2nd and 3rd floors are okay, but most of the 1st has been destroyed. He sat down on a desk that had fallen over and continued. I only saw it with the light from my lighter, but I think it'll be difficult to get out that way too. Is your head okay? Yuko-senpai asked. I tripped on a brick as I went down to the 1st floor. I fell head first. It's nothing major. The emergency lights are on, but it's still dark. Tashiro-san said as he looked around the room. But it's a little easier to walk down the hall now. Then I remembered something. I dug around in the breast pocket of my jacket and pulled out my favorite pen light. With this, I'd be able to follow the emergency lights. I'll go check the 1st floor. I'm worried about the husband and wife that manage the building down there, Asafuji-san said. I'll go too. Tashiro-san also stood up. Will 2 more of you join us? I'll go too. I couldn't let anything bad happen to Yuko-senpai, so I volunteered myself. I'll go too, Yuko-senpai answered. I looked and Katsumata stood up as well. Hey, if all of you come, we'll be in trouble if something happens here, Tashiro-san said, smiling bitterly. Katsumata, you stay here and help me. I want to clean up the place a little more. As he said that, Gomikawa-san started picking up a desk that had been turned over. Katsumata glared at me and clucked his tongue. Was he after Yuko-senpai as well? Relying on the dim emergency lights, we went down the hall. I took the lead, followed by Yuko-senpai, Asafuji-san, and Tashiro-san. Something warm gripped my left hand. When I looked, Yuko-senpai had grabbed it and was walking beside me. Inside, I jumped for joy. "Does the manager live here?" Asafuji-san answered me. "Yes, and they have a 5-year-old child too." We went down the stairs to the 3rd floor. Should we check the other rooms as well? We walked down the 3rd floor hall at Yuko-senpai's suggestion. Each floor of this building had 4 rooms. The first floor had the lobby and manager's room, so that meant there were 12 rooms total on each of the other 3 floors. Other than the editorial office, a computer software company also worked on the 4th floor, but they had all gone home and the office was locked. A foreign investment firm took up 3 rooms on the 3rd floor. The other was empty. A construction firm used 2 rooms on the 2nd floor, while a design office used the other 2. The company on the 3rd floor looked to be empty. The offices were tightly locked from the outside. We went down to the 2nd floor, and first, I reached for the construction firm door. The door opened without a sound. "Is anyone here?" The room had been turned upside down, and the emergency lights didn't even reach the corners of it. I called out as I shone my pen light inside. Nobody answered, but as I shone my light on the shadows of the fallen desks, 3 surprised faces appeared. They were all women. "We're from the magazine editorial office on the 4th floor. We're not weirdos." Asafuji-san's gentle tone calmed the women, and they finally approached us. "We're office ladies for Takano Construction," the oldest-looking woman said. She looked to be in her mid-30s, slim, with glasses, like an old maid. The other 2 must have been around 20. The oldest woman called herself Kanai, and she was the other 2's supervisor. "What on earth has happened to us?" The young one, who looked kind of boyish, said to me. She looked worried, but she spoke clearly. She said her name was Yuki. I can't say for certain, but I briefly told them what I knew. "So, nobody can save us?" The other one, sobbing, cried hopelessly. Her name was Kanako. Tears had ruined her flashy makeup, and her face was a mess. "We have hope." Tashiro-san's bold lie was surprising. "Huh?" He let out a dubious mutter as he went to take the ladies back to our office. He was staring at the window. I shone my light towards it. There was no rock face on the other side of the broken window. Pitch black darkness expanded into the horizon. We ran towards the window. When I shone my light outside, I understood. There was a stone roof above us. The building had fallen into a cave. It was impossible to tell how big it was. It was about 1.5 meters from the window to the ground. The wreckage of the first floor, which had collapsed with the shocks, made it look easy enough to get down. A strong light shone behind us as we were shocked. When we turned around, Kanai-san was holding a beam light. "You can see better with this." The powerful beam shone into the cave. It was smaller than I thought. There appeared to be paths leading to the building's front entrance and to the right of us as well, just big enough for a single person to fit through. "What is this?" Asafuji-san muttered, shocked. "Let's check outside later as well," she muttered after a brief moment. We had to check the other rooms first. I handed Kanai-san my penlight, and we instructed them to go to the editorial office. But the three women refused to move. They were too scared. "We heard strange footsteps," Yuki said, her voice trembling. "They sounded barefoot, and there was a creepy groan." "Maybe it was the manager," I said. "He's injured." "He went in the room across from here," Kanako added. "Then I'll escort you." The three women followed Tashiro-san up the stairs. We went to check the design office across from them. Some people were in there, but it was already too late for them. Were they designers? The three corpses were badly injured. Blood poured from a man's head, his neck twisted the wrong way. A woman was squished beneath a locker, and another woman lay on top of some broken glass. The office showed traces of enormous damage from the fall. But something was strange. I observed the room carefully in the light. The horrific stench of dead bodies assaulted my nose. Yuko-senpai clung to me and turned her face away. I put a hand on her back and led her away from the room. "Are you okay?" Asafuji-san also left the room and asked her, worried. I left Yuko-senpai in her hands and returned inside. Again, the stench hit me. My stomach contents crawled up through my throat. Each corpse showed signs of flesh being gouged out. That didn't seem like it would have happened in the accident. It was like some wild beast had torn pieces out of them. What on earth happened here? I thought I should investigate the bodies a little more closely. This is terrible. Asafuji-san covered her mouth with her handkerchief and looked at the bodies. Asafuji-san, don't you think these wounds are a little too strange to be from the accident? There's no way someone's flesh could be gouged out like that just from a locker falling on them. Something else must have done this. Something else? As she looked at me, Asafuji-san's face twisted, like she was going to laugh and cry at the same time. I don't know what it could be either, but it feels like something beyond our understanding is going on here. I turned to look at the window. Desks, chairs, and copy machines covered most of it, the other side of which was covered by dirt. Maybe there was a clue somewhere. I had to look closer. Suddenly, I heard a scream. It came from the hall. "Yuko-senpai! Yuko-chan!" Asafuji-san and I screamed and ran for the door at the same time, bursting out into the hall. A bad feeling washed over me. I hoped nothing had happened to her, but when I called out her name, there was no response. I gave Asafuji-san instructions, and we each went to search the hall and surrounding areas. I opened the door to the opposing Takano construction and looked inside. She wasn't there. The emergency lights dimly lit the stairs landing of the second floor. She wasn't there either. "Domon-kun, look!" Asafuji-san screamed and pointed to the first floor. I panicked and looked downstairs. The emergency lights seemed to have broken because the first floor was still in darkness. I shone my light downstairs on a pile of rubble. At the bottom of the crumbling stairs, I saw an arm wearing a sweater in the shadows of the rubble. I knew that color. Using the rubble as a step, we went down to the first floor. We went down to what would normally have been half the height of the roof. Yuko-senpai lay at the bottom of the stairs. Asafuji-san held her up and took something out of her pocket. It was a wet tissue. She removed the wrapping, took the inside out, and wiped Yuko-senpai's forehead. She quickly came back to. "Are you okay?" Yuko-senpai slowly nodded her head at my words, and, shaking her head as she stood up, she said, "I felt sick in that room and thought that I was going to throw up. Then, when I opened the toilet door..." She stopped for a moment. Looking closer, she was trembling. A headless man in a suit was standing there, and I ran for the stairs. "And then you fell." Yuko-senpai slowly nodded again. There hadn't been anyone in there when I looked. What on earth had she seen? "Yuko-chan, shall we go back to the office?" Asafuji-san said in an unusually kind voice. We took Yuko-senpai back to the office, and the room had mostly been cleaned up. For some reason, Tashiro-san still wasn't back. We told Gomikawa-san what had happened, left Yuko-senpai behind, and then Asafuji-san and I went back downstairs. Tada-san muttered as he typed away at his computer. As I left the room, he came over to speak to me. "Domon-kun, I'm doing something interesting right now, so look forward to it once you get back." Having said that, he returned to his computer. Asafuji-san and I went down to the first floor. "Hey, manager!" The two of us screamed and went to the manager's room behind the stairs. We threw aside the rubble blocking our way and went further in. The walls had collapsed and the roof fallen in. Something skin-coloured and dirty poked out from beneath the thick concrete wall. It was a human leg. We put all our strength into moving the fallen wall. Just as we expected, the manager and his wife were beneath it. They were already dead. "Where's their son, Nobu-kun?" Asafuji-san said as she looked around. "Let's find him," I said. At that moment, I saw something out the corner of my eye. Something was looking right at us. I pretended to slowly go further in, then suddenly flashed my light behind me. A child stood in the circle of light. He moved to cover his eyes with his hands, but it was so sudden that he didn't run. "Nobu-kun!" Asafuji-san smiled and approached the child. "It's okay now." It shocked me that such a kind voice was able to come from this woman. Nobu-kun clung to her and started crying. "Shh, shh, you did well. What a strong boy," Asafuji-san said as she held him. A ghost. I saw a ghost." He tried hard to tell us through his sobs. He must have felt so helpless. His complexion was still pale. Perhaps he calmed down in Asafuji-san's arms because he soon slowly began to tell us what he'd seen. He had been in the toilet when it happened. He opened the door to run after the first tremors. That was when the building fell. As he ran out into the hall, he lost consciousness. On the contrary, it had been a good thing he wasn't running around. He only had light injuries. When he woke back up, he looked for his parents, but it was too dark to find them. When he reached the hall, he sensed someone in the darkness. Instinctively, he hid, and the presence passed by him, heading towards the stairs. Whatever it was too difficult for this 5-year-old child to understand. All he said was, "It was like a monster with bad injuries." We carried him back to the stairs. He clung to Asafuji-san and refused to let go. I told them to wait there and went to check the entrance myself. Concrete rubble blocked the front entrance to the Nakai building, the entrance I'd entered through just a few short hours ago. But looking closer, there was a single space that remained open. I climbed up and looked outside through it. Rock walls appeared in the beamlight. 4 meters ahead, I could see the entrance to a passage. I noticed the entrance to what looked like a cave had been discolored black. I gripped the beamlight and proceeded forward. Something was beyond this point, I instinctively knew. I rushed over to the entrance and found a large bloodstain. It wasn't a normal amount. A felt-tip pen sat half submerged in the blood. I wiped the blood off on my jeans, and something was written on the side of the pen. It said, "Japan Design Contest Commemoration." It was the pen Tashiro-san always used. I ran back to the Nakai building. Terrifying thoughts filled my head. I twisted through the gap in the rubble, and shining the light at my feet, ran back to the stairs. Asafuji-san sat on the concrete pile that had once been the stairs, with Nobukun asleep in her arms. He fell asleep. Asafuji-san's voice sounded tired, but I changed the subject. Tashiro-san said he fell from these stairs, right? That was how he got the cut on his head. Yes, that's what he said. As soon as I heard that, I shone the light to the floor. There was nothing but concrete everywhere. Do you see blood anywhere? He hurt himself bad. If he hurt himself here, then it's a little strange there's no blood. Maybe he's a little muddled after hitting his head, Asafuji-san said, using her common sense. Then I showed her the pen I picked up and told her what I'd seen. He went outside. Asafuji-san thought for a moment and then mumbled. At any rate, the amount of blood over there isn't normal. He wouldn't be up and walking if that were the case. You mean he should be dead? We looked at each other and then rushed up the stairs. We ran as fast as we could for the office. When we reached the hall on the 3rd floor, a figure stumbled towards us. I shone the light on it and clearly saw what it was. Blood poured from its head, its neck bent in an unnatural way, and its arms dangled by its side. It was the dead body we'd just seen in the design office, slowly shuffling towards us. We fled as fast as we could. We screamed as we reached the office and banged on the door. When the door opened, we tumbled inside. "You're late. Where did you—" Asafuji-san ignored Gomikawa-san and flew into a rage. "Where are those 3 women? Where did Tashiro-kun go?" 3 women? Everyone looked at Asafuji-san confused. I told them everything that had happened after we left the room. Then I added at the end, after seeing that dead designer walking, we might have some idea of what happened to Tashiro-san. When I was done talking, I plopped down on a nearby chair. Yuko-senpai came over and sat down next to me. I could feel her arm trembling. "Maybe that person wasn't dead," Yuko-senpai said, as though trying to convince herself. I checked as well. He was absolutely dead, Asafuji-san said. "Tada also might have found something big. It might have something to do with what you just told us," Gomikawa-san said as he looked at Tada-san in front of his computer. Everyone gathered around him. Tada-san had successfully fixed his computer and connected to the system again. The phone lines were cut, so he was using the optical cable for the data telecommunication line specific to our office. A thick cord extended out of the broken wall. First, I was wondering if there might be an exit somewhere, so I grabbed the building's floor plans from the construction company. Tada-san started talking as he stared at the screen. Whatever was hidden, he wanted to see it. And with his hacker personality, Tada-san had discovered something unbelievable. Even within the company, apparently only certain people knew of it. Tada-san mumbled, and it was difficult to understand him. He found something terrible. Gomikawa-san interjected, annoyed. Tada-san tapped at the keyboard and brought something up on screen. January 17th, 1945. Early dawn. The development of the Zakuro project, which many in the army were looking forward to change the tide of war, was cancelled. It's unknown why this research that was on the verge of completion, led by the Doctor of Biology, Takano Bunguro, was abandoned, but it's rumoured that there were numerous victims involved in the experiments. Gomikawa-san was surprised. Takano Bunguro. That's the same name as the previous owner of Takano Construction on the 2nd floor of this building. Everyone inhaled sharply, and then Katsumata spoke as though to refute him. "No way. It's just a coincidence." "But it ain't like common names like Suzuki or Yamada. It's a bit much to be a coincidence." Nobody disagreed with him. "Even so," Yuko-senpai said, "I wonder what this Zakuro is." Hearing that, Tada-san pointed at the screen and spoke. "There's an explanation written here." Everyone looked at the screen at once. A considerable amount of care and consideration is required when dealing with Zakuro. This drug is able to regenerate cells, and if a dosage is given into a dead body's cells a few hours after death, it's possible for the body to move around exactly the same as when alive. However, at present, the cognitive abilities of the subject dramatically decreases. The body continues to decompose as well. As for the experiment to extract the nucleus that forms the core of the cell regeneration. What on earth was it talking about? Everyone fell silent. Reviving dead bodies? There was no way they could really do that. But I had really seen it. A dead body had really moved. Zakuro. I wonder why they called it Zakuro. Unable to bear the silence, I spoke to no one in particular. Katsumata was the one to speak first. Why? That's what code names are. They're meant to be hard to understand. But it's gotta have a hidden meaning, right? Yuko-senpai said. Yeah. I tried thinking about it, but I couldn't come up with an answer. Then Asafuji-san, who had been quiet until that point, spoke quietly. I've heard that Zakuro, pomegranates, taste just like human flesh. Huh? The calm way she spoke inspired fear in everyone. In old fairy tales and such, people often gave sacrifices to Oni and monsters, right? In one of those tales, people presented a newborn to the Oni each year to appease its wrath, and therefore the rest of the children would be safe. Then one mother, unable to bear it any longer, substituted a pomegranate for her child, which was said to taste just like human flesh, and she was able to save her baby. But in reality, there used to be a tradition of poor farming families killing their children, and to memorialize them, they offered pomegranates, which might be a better way of thinking of it. That's why it's said that if you climb a pomegranate tree in a shrine or somewhere similar, that it's bad luck. Asafuji-san said and sighed. Her face seemed rather pale. So, Dr. Takano borrowed that saying and... My head started spinning in circles. Maybe this is what's actually going on. I put forth a suggestion. Just before, we saw a dead body moving around, and this file that Tada-san found, I think it has to have something to do with the old army. Gomikawa-san's voice grew rough. Hey, even if we suppose that's true, why would the old army leave chemical weapons lying around? The war ended over 50 years ago, you know? Maybe that experiment is still ongoing. What the hell? The assumption was a little out there, but there was no other explanation. You saw the screen, right? Think closely about what it said. And just what did it say, huh? Gomikawa-san looked up as though trying to remember. At present, right? So, if the old army is still carrying out experiments now, they'd need like a national research facility or something, yeah. So, that would mean the government is still carrying out the experiments. Everyone fell silent. So they weren't going to believe my story after all. Then Yuko-senpai spoke up. I feel the same way. Hey. Now do you believe this nonsense as well? I do. Do you really think it's that unbelievable? It's no different to finding an unexploded bomb, right? Katsumata and Gomikawa-san raised their voices in opposition, but Yuko-senpai remained firm. I mean, there's a real dead body walking around out there. Do you have any other explanation? And on top of that, this large underground area is also evidence. If the government wasn't hiding it, people would discover a hole this big in the middle of the city. There are subways, and water pipes passing through, so they'd find it during construction. That's true, but... Katsumata faltered. So then, Takano construction must have something to do with the government, Asafuji-san said. Then they built this building to cover it. Normally, if people found such a large underground area during construction, they'd stop building. Seemed Katsumata and Gomikawa-san were coming around. So then, this area wasn't caused by the fall, but was man-made? Katsumata asked, and Asafuji-san answered. It has to be. But why? No, just... there must be an exit then, I guess. For Katsumata, it was a rather logical idea. I quickly asked Tada-san something. Tada-san, is there a map of the underground area? A small blossom of hope bloomed, but then Tada-san's answer cut it short. I'm sorry, but there doesn't seem to be one. But more importantly than that, check this out. He pointed to something on the screen. I found what looks like a list of directors for Takano Construction. And... isn't that Tashiro-san? What? Asafuji-san looked dubiously at the screen, and no doubt about it, Tashiro-san's name was there. Why is his name? Asafuji-san and Gomikawa-san tilted their heads in confusion. Tashiro-san? Was he watching over the Zakuro project? Yuko-senpai asked. Then I realized something. I turned towards everyone. He must have been. When the building fell, he was the only one not in the room, right? He said he went up to the roof, but he didn't really. Yuko-senpai finished my train of thought for me. That's right. He knew about the basement, so he must have gone down to check it was okay. Silence fell over the room again. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. We're saved! The rescue team is here! I screamed without thinking. We're in here! Please help us! I opened the door. I answered the knocks. I turned the doorknob. Several bodies poked through the slight opening in the door. By the time I realized it, I grappled with Tashiro-san. No, what had once been Tashiro-san. I didn't care what anyone else thought. Help me! Katsumata! I screamed. Katsumata flew over at once. He threw his weight behind a massive kick. The corpse stumbled backwards, and Katsumata grabbed for the door. I ran for it as well. The two of us slammed it shut as hard as we could. We were finally able to shut the corpse out. Everyone else was so shocked they slumped in their chairs. But there was no time to relax. Gomikawa-san, now do you believe me? He just nodded limply. So he really did go outside to check. And then something happened in front of the left cave. Maybe a rock fell and hit him on the head. And then he died. I said to no one in particular. Then he came back to life. Perhaps, for whatever reason, that drug that regenerates cells still has some effect. Maybe it vaporized and it's still floating around in the cave. First things first, if we don't get out of here, we're going to be killed. Yuko-senpai said, her voice on the verge of screaming. I wonder which of those paths leads out. Katsumata, who had been quiet up until that point, then spoke up. I'll go and check. Nobody could argue with his tone. The confidence he had gained from learning karate since he was 4 years old showed. I'll go with you. I couldn't get heated. I stood up. Mr. Author, sir, you think you'll be okay? He was no longer the Katsumata, the part-timer who dealt with us. You just saw that thing, right? I said as I stood up, and Katsumata glared at me. We opened the door a little and peeked outside. There was a woman by the stairs. It was Yuki, from the 3 office ladies. I could only see the right half of her face as she turned to face us. As soon as we leave, close the door behind us. Having said that, we slipped out into the hall. Katsumata stood before me with the light, and I walked behind him, holding a piece of metal from the steel bookshelf. Yuki came closer. Katsumata gave her a roundhouse kick, and I hit her ankles with my steel pole. She fell to the floor and writhed around. Quickly! We jumped down the stairs. As we went down the stairs towards the first floor, we saw the manager's corpse walking up. Get in that room! Katsumata screamed, and we ran into the Takano construction office. A figure appeared in the darkness. The suited corpse had no head. This must have been what Yuko-senpai saw. The headless corpse tackled me, and I flew out the window. Katsumata followed us. There didn't appear to be anyone else around. Which way are we gonna go? Katsumata asked as we ran. Right. We went down the right passage. We ran as fast as we could down the passage that seemed to be held up by wooden logs. After running at full speed for close to 10 minutes, we could barely move our legs anymore. No corpses followed us. As we slowed down to a walk, we heard the sound of water running somewhere in front of us. Exhausted, I used the steel pole I was holding as a walking stick. Seeing me like that, Katsumata said, "Wait here a minute." He seemed to almost scream it before he ran off. I fell to the ground. It was upsetting, but I had reached my physical limit. Hey, wake up! It was Katsumata's voice. I'd apparently fallen asleep without realizing it. Katsumata flashed a peace sign at me while I rubbed my eyes. All right, let's go get everyone. We started running again. Did you find the exit? I asked as we ran. I reached what looked like a riverbank, but there was a large rock in front of the exit. It was blocking it, but I guess it broke apart in the earthquake. If that was true, then Takano Construction must have put it there. The earthquake was our savior. When we got back to Nakai building, fear washed over me once more. Domon-san, you ready to deal with those guys again? Katsumata said, his voice threatening. It was true. If we didn't deal with them now, it would be harder for us later. All right, let's do it. I answered in a loud voice, pushing aside my fear. We entered the first floor through the entrance. 3 corpses squatted by the stairs. They were eating something. Shit! Katsumata exhaled sharply and closed the gap. I ran as well with my steel pole at the ready. "Destroy their legs!" Katsumata screamed. The corpses that stood up and started coming towards us were the woman who had been squished by the glass, Tashiro-san, and the manager's wife. I did as Katsumata said and aimed for their legs. I lowered myself in front of them and hit their legs with the pole. Tashiro-san fell on the concrete. Then the next one, the woman covered in glass. Katsumata crushed their legs with a large piece of concrete. We fled up the stairs, leaving the crawling corpses behind. As we ran up the stairs, we saw what they'd been eating. It was the office lady, Kanako, the remains of her dead body lying on top of the pile of rubble. "We found the exit!" We screamed when we reached the office door on the 4th floor. The door opened and Yuko-senpai's face appeared. "We can get out of here!" Katsumata fell on the sofa as soon as we entered. Machi was awake again. "Can you run?" Katsumata asked her as he helped her up. His gentle voice didn't really fit the situation. "Yeah, I'm okay," she said. Nobu-kun was asleep on Gomikawa-san's back. Everyone left the room. The hall was empty. Katsumata took the lead and went down the stairs. The 3rd floor was also empty. We reached the 2nd floor and went into Takano construction. It was also empty. Gomikawa-san stuck his body out the window and then screamed. Something was growing out of the floor from the building to the paths. No, something was trying to crawl out of the ground. Tattered army uniforms. Rotted bodies with white bones sticking out. Long departed souls took solid form. They were the victims of the Zakuro experiments. They died because of them and were buried in the earth. Then the experiments were cancelled and the unneeded liquid abandoned on top of them. Why hadn't they woken up until now? If they were reacting to life force, then it was us that woke them up. 5 soldiers had already appeared from the waist up. "Run!" We all ran around the soldiers, but they crawled out of the ground faster than we had anticipated. Grotesque sounds echoed, and the corpses that even hell rejected followed us. I ran at the end of the line and felt their bloodlust run down my back. They were right behind us. I turned and swung the steel pole sideways. It hit with a dry thud. The soldier went flying as bone shards from his head to shoulder shattered. Then a bony hand grabbed Katsumata's wrist as he was protecting Machi. 3 soldiers surrounded them. I lifted the steel pole and leapt. Using its downward speed, I brought the pole down on top of its shoulder. It crunched and cut all the way down to the ribs. Without hesitation, I flew at the corpse bearing down on Katsumata's neck. I lifted the steel pole and crushed both its arms. Finally free, Katsumata grinned and punched them in the face. Asafuji-san held Machi up and they ran down the right-hand tunnel. Gomikawa-san followed with Nobu-kun on his back. "Hee!" something caught Tada-san. Katsumata rushed to his side and delivered a double kick. The corpse holding Tada-san went flying to the ground. Someone behind us screamed. I turned around, and the last crawling soldier had grabbed Yuko-senpai. I immediately threw the steel pole I was holding. It hit the soldier right in the leg. The soldier lost balance, and Katsumata sent it flying with a punch to the chest. The final soldier fell apart on the ground. Katsumata approached me as I leaned against a rock wall to breathe. "You're pretty good, man," he said with an almost blushing smile. "'Cause I don't want to die," I said. "Let's go, Mr. Domon, sir." "Yeah, let's go." We walked through the dirt tunnel. Finally, we heard the sound of water, and it gradually got louder. Then, we were finally able to get outside through the grass-covered exit. There was a large riverbank. The wind was cool, but it carried with it an amazing smell. It was the smell of the city, the smell of Tokyo. I looked at my watch. It was just after 5 a.m. The first trains would be leaving soon. But when I thought of Yuko-senpai in my arms, I kind of wanted to stay like that forever.